It's 1967, and America's involvement in Vietnam is escalating. Declared the living room war, there was no escaping Vietnam. Well, almost no escaping.
This broadcast has been brought to you by
Ch.8's body.
Drive a car, but the 1960s
lemon refreshed Mr. Clean gets the dirt.
Martha Rossler was dumbfounded. How could Americans be interested with the war one moment and interested in a couch the next? So she combined them. To her, they were inseparable. She used magazines that came into the American household every day and called the series House Beautiful, Bringing the War Home. We need to constantly question becoming passive consumers of images, to always look to the margins. What is it telling us not only by what's in the frame, but also what is the frame and what's behind the frame? In 1991, New York was facing a different conflict.
The AIDS crisis was very much part of this political landscape that was very much in conflict.
Where does he get off taking our tax money to promote homosexuality?
Politics won't cure AIDS. Not doing anything but killing Americans.
So Felix Gonzalez Torres hangs two clocks on the wall. There is never such a thing as an apolitical or inert artwork.
People were fearful and angry.
Gonzalez Torres used simple imagery as a response to the era's uncertainty. He used light bulbs, he used candy, he used clocks. Two clocks touching, set to the same time, that gradually go out of sync.
It could be circumstance, or it could be sickness or disease that suddenly brings you out of sync with something or someone. It doesn't kind of hit you over the head right away. It allows you to kind of linger there for a minute. Its subtlety is its power.
Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother, Martha Rossler's House Beautiful, Bringing the War Home, and Felix Gonzalez Torres' untitled Perfect Lovers.
In the 1970s, radical artists belittled the art market and the commodification of art, and the art market soon became monstrous because capitalism took over. Artists hated the fact that art's economic dependence revolved around capital, because capital was the root of racism, it was the root of war, of oppression, but this was harmonious with the development of heroic art. So heroic art was actually seen as phony and money hungry, and the only person who was an exception was Marcel Duchamp. He was a poet of deterioration, and young artists appreciated the freedom that he offered, and they saw him as gratuitous. At this time, Duchamp invented a category of art called inframents. He claimed that it couldn't be defined, but it can only be understood through examples. Duchamp took interest in shedding light onto things that are not commonly observed or appreciated. One example being the urinal that he had signed, which was presented in one of the previous groups. If you guys remember seeing that. Inframents embodied various forms of culture that were unseen or neglected in one way or another. He proposed to make use of the little wasted energies, like someone's laugh or someone breathing out smoke. And it was used in a lot of New York's art circles. Some claimed that the form of art was silly, or it was kind of doodle-like, or a way to just fill up time, but others saw its critical purpose. The message, art in the larger frame of things, is small, and one only makes it to think a little more clearly. Nobody or no one intelligent, in Duchamp's implied view, can presume to change society. Marcel Duchamp's inframents art inspired a reaction against the typical standard modernist art that was taking place in America. So the big, put-together, extravagantly painted pieces were replaced with art that was so small and insignificant that one would barely even notice it. On the very left, we have Richard Tuttle. This is called the 44th Wire piece. And he was a sculpture artist whose work consisted of a dun-colored rag, or a lot of his work actually consisted of a piece of bent wire. And he was actually chosen to represent the United States at the 1976 Venice Biennale with a piece of unpainted wood, a little longer than a pencil, and 3/4 of an inch thick. In the middle, we have Marcel Duchamp with the bicycle wheel. I believe we've seen this one before. This was originally made in 1913, but it was lost and he had to recreate it in 1951, and he recreated it with this version. The original one, the bicycle wheel was connected to a kitchen utensil, and then this one is connected to a wooden stool. So he basically mounted this bicycle wheel upside down onto the wooden stool and just spun it because he wanted to watch it. He enjoyed looking at it. His only explanation, really. On the very right, we have Robert Rauschenberg with the Tibetan Garden Song. It's a mixed media sculpture consisting of the Chinese cello and a chrome washtub. And this one symbolizes a reaction on the position of Tibet and its inability to gain independence. These pieces are all ready-mades, and this means that the artists all transformed a manufactured everyday object into a work of art. And this was all just art because the artist said so. So now I have a question for you. If you had to choose one of these art pieces to display in your home, which would you choose and why? And which room would you put it in? I feel like I would probably choose Robert Rauschenberg's Tibetan Garden Song. I kind of like the guitar look, and I think I would put it... That's a tough one. I think I would put it in my living room, like maybe in the corner next to the TV. If I didn't choose that one, I'd probably choose the wire one just because it might be easier to hide.
Hello everyone, this is Ivy Garcia. I will be emphasizing abstract expressionism art in the 1970s. I will also be introducing you to a few key figures who were inspired by this movement. Abstract expressionism, also known as the New York School, is a movement like no other. It's not landscape, history, or genre painting. It's a new form of painting. It's art that does not need meaning. Abstract art allows viewers to decide what the artwork is about, on a personal level. Abstract expressionism inspired artists to venture out from the norm. There was no longer a need for meaning or explanation. For instance, on the left, artist Elizabeth Murray was an admired painter who did not use the normal boundaries. She, like many artists in the world, strived to stand out and make her work known without looking at the description. She wanted people who came in contact with her art saying, "Ah, that's Murray's work." Instead of painting on a normal canvas like most artists would, she began creating shaped canvases. She carried her experimentation further during the 1980s. When looking at her piece, Painter's Progress, a palette and 3 brushes are shattered into 19 pieces. This artwork gives off a jigsaw puzzle effect. Her abstract painting incorporated shapes, interlocking, fun screaming colors, and adds a cartoony flavor. Murray displays mild artistic temperaments by obsessing over broken pieces. Many critics view her art as unstable and triggered with frank anxiety. After looking at her painting, do you agree with the critics? Does this make you feel some sort of uneasiness? Another abstract artist who strove for uniqueness is Gene Scully. Scully's art is described as a battle between system and emotion. Being a fierce temperament artist, his art also included anxiety. In an interview, he admitted being an extremely emotional person. His intentions are to create art that everyone can relate to. He is able to achieve that through color and shape because he states that the two share international language. These large-scale paintings can have a mixture of squares and stripes, giving off a checkerboard illusion. Someone once asked him, "Why stripes?" He answered, "Because they can be anything, and they can be anything because they are nothing. To make nothing into something is more interesting than making something into something else." This stood out to me the most because you and I could be looking at his painting, Grey Wolf, for a few minutes and both come up with two different interpretations. These two amazing abstract artists have a unique twist to their paintings. They both stepped out of their comfort zone in order to make a mark, which is really bold because one never knows how others will react. If I had to pick a painting to take home, I would choose Sheen Scully's Doric Gray Pink. It has that welcoming, calming, and soothing feeling, as where a gray wolf looks like something I would see at a hotel lobby. However, that's just my opinion. What about you? Which painting catches your eye the most? Philip Guston is a Canadian-American painter. He is known for leading the transition from abstract expressionism to neo-expressionism in painting, leaving behind what most people like to call solid abstraction. Neo-expressionist artists depicted their subjects in an almost raw manner with intense colors that have been rejected by the previous art movements. With returning to the human body and other recognizable objects, Guston incorporated his own twist. He was fascinated with the comic strip Crazy Cat by George Herman, which inspired him to paint cartoonish figures. His work is funny, goofy, and profound at the same time. Most of Guston's work included hooded figures reminiscent of the KKK. His paintings are not meant to reference racism, but instead to take a stand against war and injustice he witnessed in American politics. Experimenting with colors such as red, bright pink, and a gunmetal gray, he questioned what would happen if you paint a light color over a dark color. Now, let's take a look at one of his artworks. Guston painted the street in 1977. This image, in many ways, is a reaction to the political and social unrest in America in the 1970s. It gives a sense of alienation and post-traumatic emptiness. Hughes says that the painting looks like a war between New Yorker bums. I could totally see that. The street provides an insight into his techniques like short horizontal strokes, hair shooting out of skinny limbs, the usage of bottom-up boots, and hidden figures. The composition is divided into 3 vertical sections. On the far right, there's a trash can filled with a mixture of empty bottles, wood, and nails. In the center, trash can lids are transformed into a classical shield, giving a sense of protecting oneself with whatever one can find. Lastly, he incorporated his signature skinny legs and the bottom of boots. In the background, Guston gives you the answer to what would happen if you paint a light color over a dark. The light color paint will appear streaky and uneven as the dark color bleeds through. After thoroughly observing this painting, I noticed 2 spiders on the horizon, giving the impression that they are waiting for action to begin. What I find most fascinating in his work is that it represents the human conditions and the anxiety felt in the 1970s. Now, would you welcome the street into your home? And if so, in which room and why? On this slide, I provided a link of a short video of Philip Guston's paints the KKK. I believe this video is important as it gives a deeper explanation as to why he painted the way he did. When you're finished watching the video, I would like you to all write down 2 signature marks he draws in all his paintings.
I think to understand Guston's late work, you really do need to begin with the so-called Klan paintings. Guston grew up in Los Angeles at a time when most people don't realize it. There was a great deal of Ku Klux Klan activity in Southern California, hence the early hooded form in some of Guston's images. They may refer to the Klan. Guston hated the Klan. He feared the Klan. But masks and hoods had shown up in Guston's work very early in his career, sometimes as a reference to the Klan, sometimes as a reference of just covering identities.